Tani nga tso terang dana yung kanga tani, nga tso terang kan chatchit nyang kanga mo tsangma la, shizho delakan samzhijiga yin.
Good afternoon to everybody who has come here today.
Tani nga terang shizho nga tso chatchit ka nangdon da kang rezina tani gum gyabshir ka tani zhigni ta lantong zaya tani ka rez.
And the topic for this afternoon's teaching is going to be related to shamatha and insight meditation.
Tani gum gyabzi jita nga tso ka tani semkam gum zhongdar shi ligzrez.
So when we talk about meditation, what we are referring to is a kind of training for the mind.
Tani tangbo nga tso gum gyab govi jimtsin da kanyante ha sarwoz tani ha korgo rez.
And what we first need to know is actually the reason why we are meditating or why we should meditate.
Tani nga tso shawa leka kang lena yang tani thomar nga tso nda le govi jimtsin da kang re. Shawa leka nda lena tela tani mdrewa kang yo kare taga thomar nga tso ha korgo ya te rez.
Whatever kind of action we undertake or whatever kind of work we do, we first need to understand the rationale for doing it. And not only the rationale, but the result that we can achieve in doing this work.
Tani perna nga tso lipo zhongdar mashina, tani nga tso lipo ndela tani nat mjata mandra mambo yungare, tani nat tela tani nga tso tsowa gana la dungar mambo yung, tani natsa ga dungar mambo yung, tani matse yang yakbozi tani mayung, suso matse tani taga tondang dambazi tani shetab ka mareze perna nga tso lipo to zhongdar mashina.
So if we don't exercise our bodies, then we will easily become sick. And with sickness and illness, much suffering will result in our lives, we'll have much inconvenience, and it will prevent us from doing a lot of things.
Tani ti jimtsin da nga tso tsama tani hako yo re, hako yo ti tani nga tso mambo ga tani zupo la zhongdar ndra mambo shek yo re.
So this is something that virtually everybody understands, and on this account most people exercise their bodies frequently.
Yena nga tso semkam ga tola tani zhongdar she goya ta nga tso mambo ga hako yo marez.
However, the need to train one's mind is not something that as many people know about.
Tara nga tso mambo ga tani zhongdar tani she ki yo ki te yang hako yo marez. Semkam go zhongdar za ki tani zhongdar za yo ya te yang nga tso mambo ga hako marez. Nga tso semkam go zhongdar za ki yo ki te yang yo pa te yang hako marez mambo ga.
Even the fact that there is such a thing as training the mind is something that not many people know about, or not everyone knows about.
Te yindi nga tso mambo ga tani nga tso semkam go zhongdar te la tani tongchong she ne tani lang zho yo res.
And for this reason, many people do not attach much importance to the training of the mind.
Tani nga tso muze ki te Gandhi zila zega yo res ne na nga tso muze ya te ngupo kang nga tso driba res na nga tso she te tani ngupo re, vembo re, she ka te tani sem res. Sem tang vembo nika la tani ki tsokpa te la tani nga tso muze ne tani maunta yo res.
So what does it mean, in fact, to be human? What is a person? A person is comprised of both a physical form, physical matter, and the mind. So we are a composite of both of these things.
Tani nga tso muze ki to ngupo kyangba yang mare, tani to di sem kyangba yang mare, tani ka tsokpa de yemba te tani thomar nga tso tani ngunzan she go res.
We're not just our physical matter, and we're not just our minds. We are a fusion of both of these things, and what we need to do at the outset is recognize this fact.
Tani nga tso muze ya te ngupo tang sem nika ka tsokpa yendi, tani nga tso ngupo ka cha te la ngupo korang ka gumko chik tang. Tani nga tso sem te la sem korang ka gumko, tani gumko mandawa ni yo res.
So on account of the fact that we are comprised of our physical selves and our minds, we have needs in respect of both of these halves. So needs in respect to our physical form and needs in respect to our minds.
Tani nga tso zpo tini gungko de kangrezina pena zamata chida jota tini khawugta o teso tamchepo ngacho tini zpo ta wembo ngubo tini gungko res.
So our physical needs, the needs of our bodies, are things like the need for food, the need for drink, for sustenance, for clean air.
Teni teso mayona teni ngacho teni zupon de teni demo thapkamare zupon di thola dumar data manda mambo teni yungres gunko teso mena.
And if we are not able to fulfill these needs, then we will experience suffering in our bodies.
Teni sem tela yang tetang jawa ze ngacho sem kham tela yang teni tetang jawa yang teni gunko mandawa yang chiores.
And just as our bodies have their needs, so too do our minds have needs of their own.
Teni sem kham ke teni gunko te kangrezina teni ngacho teni yang takpa ga tawa masoso la tawa la ndamanda mambo yore tinani tawa yang takpa gore ndashi yang takpa gore teni toso teni ngacho sem kham ke teni
As for the needs of our mind, there are a variety of opinions, in fact, on what these are. But what we do need to arrive at is an accurate view of what our needs are and an accurate awareness of the needs of our minds.
Teni ngacho zupula goya teni zamatang teni chitang teni khawutang teso thamayang yo teni semkham la goya teni yang takba tawa dang yang takba samlo dang teso chama yo sona teni mokchik ta zo mot teni dethang ga ngane ne thap kres.
It's only after we have satisfied the physical needs of our body, whether in respect of food, water, air, etc., and then the needs of our minds in terms of a proper understanding, proper views, and proper thoughts. When these both aspects are brought together, at this point can we really talk about living healthily.
Teni teni kinani kang mena yang teni pena teni lipo gungko yakpo mena da teni semkham go gungko yakpo mena da kang mena yang chit mena teni ngacho dethang ngane yarje san rawatan choa kerwatan to so shitap ko mare teni dungar mambo yung gondos yung gres.
However, if one aspect of these needs is lacking, then we will not, in fact, be able to live in a happy and healthy manner.
Teni te ngacho khorang ga teni ngubo ga teni chunyet te ngubo khorang ga nesar te teni ziri te ngacho tapadang rewa yo mare je pe na ngacho te chushen kan ga chushe ta moshe ta yana nangba she ta yeshi she ta teni ga tapalang rewa yo mare kangkanglam rewa mare khono ngubo rang ga nesar te teni ziri ngacho tapa shinkan zgi na mogli te teni ziri tapa moshin kan zgi na teni ziri yana nangba yenare teni ta yeshi yenare.
So characterizing the human like this in respect of its various needs is something that is just a fact or the basic essence of what a human is. It's not a religious characterization. It doesn't rely on having a particular religious faith, whether it be Buddhist or Christian or otherwise. It's an objective statement of what it means to be human.
Teni ngachu tarta teni ngachu choa na la teni dungur mambo zu yong gundu jite so tham chepo choa na la dungur dam mambo yore te lipo kyangwa ga yang mare sem kyangwa ga yang mare kap sang ngachu lipo gum kho yak bo me bi gem sin ji teni dungur yong gundu kap sang ngachu teni sem kham go thola teni sem kham go do pa te yak bo kong ma tha pa. In
the course of our everyday lives, we experience all manner of sufferings. They're not necessarily exclusively physical sufferings or mentally derived. Sometimes when we don't or are unable to fulfill our physical needs, we experience suffering in this regard. And sometimes when we're not able to satisfy the desires of our minds, we also come upon suffering.
Teni kyaparta ngacho teni perna tastan rawo inna teni ngacho chisho ko teni chowa ngubo chowa te yargi teni songyo pa teni ka inna teni ngacho go dungar mangchi ata teni sem go tode yong dungar te res.
But in the current day, when we live in a state of relative material affluence, most of our suffering does in fact derive from the suffering of our minds.
Tani ngama gnikamna nguma razina tini ngubogun sowa yargi maswa ti nekam razina tini semga tola yang dumur yo re tan mambo zut tini nga so ta lipo dumur re ngamaina.
In eras gone by, when we did not enjoy the same standard of living that we do today, then whilst we did, of course, have experienced mental suffering, a lot of our the pain that we encountered was due to physical suffering.
Tani nga so mamang chewa za ko wang shina roa mir ko lorgi ko wang shina mamang chewa za ko wang shina perna tangbo lig dumur tini zaje me pa konji me pa te so mambo yong tani zaje konji te so yopi jini ta sem go toni dumur mambo yong tani shine tani shirtang mir ko lorgi la tin rizre lorgi mandawi ne kamna dumur mandawan duze.
In general, looking at the course of human history, it has tended to be the case that people began with suffering related to their physical lives. And then as their needs for food and clothing were satisfied, the mental suffering began to increase. So with different stages in human history, different sufferings or kinds of suffering have ensued.
Tani mokchig lam so na ze nga so roa mi rig ze ni tani ma shit mokchig lam so na mokchig kun so wa na la na te dang ra bore be na kap sang nga so semkham gu dungur da mambo yore kap sa tini lig dungur da tani mambo ndus.
So even in respect of an individual, one person, this is how things operate. From time to time we will have more mental suffering, and other times we will experience more physical suffering.
Tindi indi pena nga so musti na pena hwanjur ko tini chakin te tini te kyobu tindi imbi nirkam na tini ta lidang lig dumur tini mambore tini pamjur ko chakin te yar yakpo chaksarwi jini tini semtok ko dumur ta mambore.
So during times when we are not in the most flourishing of economic circumstances, we may experience physical suffering, but after we've resolved our situation in this regard, then mental suffering will begin to multiply.
Tini tinji dumur tela tini nga so ina musdang si na tini nga so sama tini dumur tela ha chang chakayon re tini ti dumur te para mepa sheya ga tondagla tini azo tini ju shawa lekkan ramra mambo pe na rigni mambo tini lakhsar mambo tini samlo mambo to so sama dumur to so par mepa sheya ga tondagla tani tsama ga tini ga samlo mambo tari samlo mambo chun ten ra was sar chun shi tani lakhsar mambo tani khsar to chi ten ra was ga tani shawa mambo le ndu ya te ma chu dumur to so mepa ga tondagla res.
But these kinds of suffering, or suffering in general, is something that humans really fear. And in order to stave off or get rid of this suffering, humans have engaged in all kinds of endeavors, whether it be inventing all kinds of new technologies, studying all kinds of cultural pursuits, all of these things engaged in with the purpose of eliminating this suffering.
Tini yina nga chu tini dumur te tan par mepa shepa ga thapsi ti thola tini nga chu ruwa mirig zinanda nga chu mamang chi shu zu ko ti thola tini noncher halepa chembo shi yores.
However, generally speaking, in terms of a method or for eliminating suffering, the majority of people are very mistaken in what they believe, in what they regard the effective method to be.
Tini noncher te kang re zena nga chu mamang chewa zu ko samlo tang ba yana nga chu dumur te chama te tini ta shirur ne pe na nga chu la chu ngupo me pan ra ota yana pamjur me pan ra ota yana katak nyanjak me pan ra ota yana thup gosa me pan ra ota wangcha me pan ra tini go shirur ko tini sar nga chu la dumur te yong ndu sam ne nga chu mamang chewa zu ko te sam go yore nga chu dumur mambo yo ya go gimchen de chama shirur na yore sam ni. And
this mistaken idea lies in the view that most of our suffering comes from external factors around us. So a lack of riches, a lack of power, a lack of status, or whatever it might be. Most people attribute their suffering to causes and factors in the world around them.
Teni tenji ge samlo to yo charti teni nga chu teni sosola dumur moyong wa tang dewa yong yi tond teni shor kana ngupo mambo pamju chim yarge se tang ngupo mambo sak tin ra wota teni soso wo teni mangchak nyanchak teni to jepi thawla chonje ta teni soso wo teni thop kosa ta teni yo yi tond la teni nga chu shor la leka mambo le yo res.
So based on this idea that suffering comes from the external world, most people, in order to address this suffering on this level, engage in accumulating riches, in achieving high status or fame. In short, they direct their energies precisely to this external world.
Tani shir nga chu dumur mambo zo to shir ne yong yo rezina yong yo re rete nga chu tani dumur chama shir ne yong yo sambi samlo to
Of course, this is not to say that none of our suffering arises from the world, the external factors around us. Of course it does. However, to think that this is in fact the entire source of our suffering is very mistaken.
Tini ten norwach chigrize, norwach nipa de kangreze na tini ngacho mamangchi gaza ka samlo tana ngacho soa na la yopi dumur ndra mambo yo pate tak thamche po mar mepa shia tang dumur ta thachu shia shepala teni nga cho shurur ka teni perna gormo mambo yo anda ta sosola thop kosa chimbo yo anda wangcha yo ba tendis yo na teni nga cho dumur ta thachu shi thop kare samni nga cho tendi tak la thapsi tendi tak la samlo tang de teni yang ten chara chigre ten de norwa ni pa de reason chara ni pa de reason.
So the first mistake is the idea that suffering is derived from the external world around us, things in our external lives. And then the second mistake is based on this first mistaken view that the way of going about addressing this suffering, getting rid of it, is to work at the level of factors in our external world too. So amassing wealth, achieving status, and engaging in efforts like this.
Teni ton ngoma tolapshana nga cho teni li tang sem gi dungur teni soso yewa shene teni nga cho she gore teni li tang sem ge dungur ni khaka yendi teni li ki dungur me pa tang sem gi dungur me pa she pa ga thapsi te ya thapsi susu yo gore thapsi chig yong go mares.
However, what we need to do is to distinguish, in fact, the needs, our physical needs, and distinguish between these needs and the needs of our mind, our psychological needs. There are solutions and methods appropriate to each of these needs. There is not a one-size-fits-all approach to both.
Teni nga cho li ki dumur teni me pa she ala ten per nga cho teni chu soso go te shawale ka drup chu chung jap ji na da le ka le ji na da to so la tin ni teni nga chu teni chu chowa ga chakin to so teni chakin to so tam chu po teni drup ji to teni nga chu li ki dumur to me pa she thap gres.
So in terms of addressing our basic needs for survival and doing work, doing some business, making some money, ensuring our conditions are in place, this is a way for addressing our physical needs.
Tani ta sem go dungur tintu me pa she gona tani yang thapsi jamba chi go re je ta ti thapsi jamba ta kang re je na tani nga cho gum jab ke ta sem kum go jongdr she ke tere.
However, in terms of addressing the needs of our mind, we need a different method. And this method is meditation, training our minds.
Tani mang che shu tu nga cho dungur mang che shu tu tini nga cho chirwa la tenim jong yore norwa tang chirwa go sam lo la tenim jong dos.
Most of our suffering really comes from mistaken thoughts and illusions in our mind.
Tani nga cho chwa ga na la namgin tini nga cho tini to nga chu tani samlo mang chi shu zu tani to chirwa re tin chirwa tele par gar matna tani dungur te cho chawa ni me pa she pa tani de she thog mares.
Since most of the suffering in our lives stems from these mistaken thoughts, then without being able to transcend these kinds of thoughts, it will be very difficult for us to move beyond our suffering.
Tini terang aso tari semkam ko jongder tini gum tini namba tamche pola tini ngochu shek yen ngochu shek tila ramba ni yoze gum mandawa ni ngochu shek yen.
So today we're going to talk about meditation as a method for addressing the needs of the mind, and I'm going to talk about 2 levels of meditation.
Tani ti nani chit kangrezena ngachon choa ga nangla tini so sem marke patang sem nangla dumar mambo shon perna tonser kana dawota yana tele jamba ga tini to kherkyang ga tini samlo kherkyang ga nadawata tini na mambo tini yongo yo te marme pa shiare je chigdo gom chigdo.
So the first type of meditation I'm going to talk about is one that can be applied in the course of our everyday lives when unhappiness arises, or for people who suffer from depression, feelings of loneliness.
Tini ti gom tela tini ngacho mangche azga tini tamba nyirja ka gom zegendu tini amarkala tarkib chimbon ro ndu lobda chimot sogona la tela jimjing mambo shekendu maung bana tele kyang tarkib chimbon ro sares.
This kind of meditation is frequently referred to as mindfulness meditation. This has become very popular in the United States, and in the future is probably likely to become even more widespread.
Teni ti gomda teni tarta teni ta ngacho lobda chimbona la jimjing shekendu teni tandawaz ka teni ta mambo z ka teni nyamli nyam shekendu ze te hale ba yakbore te na ngacho teni man thone penatini sem marke pada teni yong ener kamna teni man thone teni ta sem chonz teni kebo yong ata teni she ke yoreta te thapsi mare yakbo mare je tele gum jamna ha chang yakbo yores.
So this kind of meditation is currently being researched a lot in universities. It's being widely practiced, and this is a good thing. It's certainly more preferable to taking medicine when we are in a state of mental discomfort. However, there are certain insufficiencies in respect of this meditation practice. It's not possible to say that this kind of meditation will be able to completely eradicate our suffering.
Teni dungar te chimbo chomar dungar chongchong she garezi dungar chongchong she jokore teni dungar chongchong re sona teni dungar te yona ya nga chu teni sem kana la teni myong thap kumare je teni dungar te chongchong ma to mena te nga chu sem kana la dungar te myong ma thap teni saro me pa teni chang ro re teni z ti gom ta she thap garezi ti gom ta nga chu dungar chechong la tong garezi chechong chongchong re ro re dungar zawani me pare kamar dungar chongchong re ro re dungar te chongchong re sona teni nga chu sem kana la dungar te myong thap kumare je ti chora ta saro yo mare dungar te me pa ro re.
This kind of meditation is able to reduce the severity of our feelings of suffering. So it's able to make a feeling of severe suffering become less severe in the way that we perceive it. It's not able to completely eradicate suffering at the root, but it is able to reduce the intensity of our feeling of suffering.
Porwa kanga nangla teni cha chongzi nyong lugna teni cha ga teni trowa ti nangla yo re ta nga chu thong ne kamna nga chu ngarmu da ma to pa teni cha ga trowa ta nyong thok mare pena ten da boris.
So it's like if we had a bowl of sweet soup and in it we put a tiny pinch of salt. When we drink the soup, even though there is a little bit of salt in it, because of the overwhelming taste of sugar, we wouldn't really taste it very strongly.
Teni dungar ni pa te kangrezena nga chu dungar te gum ni pa te kangrezena dungar me pa shi ke gum ni pa te kangrezena teni nga chu dungar sama chawa ni me pa shi ya teni gum jamba chigres.
So this being the first kind of meditation, the second kind of meditation, this one oriented to eradicating suffering at its root.
Tani ti dungur ti gom ti niki nangni gom tambuta tani nga chu chula tapa shimkhani na gom chokore chula tapa mashimkhani na gom chokore tenda waz ka penda nangba inna gom chokore yangna nangba mayim batini ta tan zambalang ka chulu jamba zala tapa shimkhan ji na ya gom chokore te chama ti sik gom na gom chokore.
And this kind of meditation is something that can be practiced by anyone, regardless of whether they're a Buddhist or they have another religious faith.
Tani gomte sasakina tani gomna gom chokoreta ina ti gomte yingin nangba garezi nangba ga tani jongona la shapas greta ina tani ta jamba so gomna gom chokorezi.
So this kind of meditation, even though anyone can practice it regardless of their background, is derived from the Buddhist tradition. It's a Buddhist meditation.
Tani nangba mayim ba tani jamba namla tani gom yo reze ngama penda jagr ke chulungda ota to sola gom tani yo reta tartanga chu mambo kusha devati tartanga chu mambo zikitini shuchok thola tani chama tani lobta chimo tan do so jimjigshi tani she yo sa gom tenga chu nangba gom zgreta ina te gomna tani nangba mayim na te gom chokores.
Meditation is not purely something in the Buddhist tradition. The Hindu tradition also has meditation traditions. However, the kind of meditation we're talking about now, and the one that is being researched widely in universities, is a Buddhist meditation tradition, even though, of course, it can be practiced by anyone.
Tani gom nipate tani karte gom gona tani ta namba mashina tani namba shini namba yani the soramba junto tani namba nangla nyamlim shia mambo yore te so nyamlim mashina tani shitham kumare tani gom karte nipate gom gona tani namba mashina tani gom thap manduze gom nipayna namba sanji ba she gore mashina gom ki yo mareze gom nipate namba tambo to sama sas gom na chokoreze tini nipata tini ta namba mashina tini gom gyo mareze tomba ni kitawa ta zogba chembo te sore.
That's all. Okay, so I made a mistake. I'm sorry. The first kind of meditation is one that can be practiced by anyone irrespective of their background. The second kind of meditation is one that requires becoming a Buddhist and having Buddhist goals in one's practice.
Tani karamba ni obati nani tani kangin nanda ngachu tani thomer ngachu hak kor goya de kang rezina ngachu chua nana yopi tani dingmer mambo yong yo ate ngachu samna shilog ne yong yo sambi dingmer te so mambo zu to shilog ne mare ngachu rang sem ga nani yong doze.
So first of all, what we need to understand for the first stage of this meditation is that all of this suffering that we have commonly attributed to coming or deriving from the outside world is in fact produced by our minds.
Tani sem ga nani yong doze ate jim kandila zegrezena sem ga nani yong zeate dingmer mambo zu to ngarang so nam tok ko wang ga tini yong doze nam tok ko wang yong yore zimba ga wang yong yore sin zimba ta nam tok zena chipare tinani ti wang yong doze.
And when we say that this suffering comes from our minds or results from the mind, what we mean that it is the result of various mental constructs and attachments that we have.
Shirtang tini nga so dewa yan nanda, dungmur yan nanda, dewa tang dungmur zikito kangris la ngunzin go rezina, ti nga so mga tini tsorwa, mga nga so mga litang sem ko tsorwa manda waz rezi, tsorwa zila zi go rezi.
When we are differentiating between what is pleasurable and what's suffering, in fact, how we really do this it really is us distinguishing on the basis of feelings in our minds or in our bodies.
Tani tsorwa ta nyamsum nyungkan ta sik nyung yo rezi, pena nga so lipola tani orma da tindishina tani tsamo 나무 어떤지 초라도 용거래 디 초라도 냠심 용건도 스 냠심 용거래지나 디는 가서 시바 냠심 용거 요래지 시바.
When, for example, various feelings occur to us, or when we perceive different feelings, then we ask, in fact, who is it or what is it that is perceiving these feelings? For example, if we incur an injury, a wound, we have a feeling of pain or stinging. In that case, what is it or who is it that is perceiving this feeling? Well, it's our consciousness, it's our sensorial consciousness.
등물 명다 맘용지지 대와 명다 맘용지지 드니 가서 시바레 드니 시바가 코랑 그 냠용 소로아즈라 대와다 등물지가 오래 마토 바 대와다 등물지지 실로라 요파즈 마레지.
So these feelings of happiness or unhappiness, pleasure or displeasure do not objectively exist in the world outside. They are feelings that our perception attributes to different experiences we have.
Tini ngacho tarta tini rentang katawan tini rentang katawa shinshil obazereze. Ti nandela mangchiwa to shinshil obare ngacho rentang katawa tila jirchu mavjivna. Ndi rentang katawa ti ngacho la dumar hajang mambo tini dumar mambo tini kidyung gres.
Value systems these days are frequently very mistaken, and in fact, if we don't make reform to our values, then we will generate only more suffering for ourselves.
Tini ngacho chowa nani dumar mambo to ngacho tani rentang katawa tila jirchuzu javjagna. Tini ngacho chowa nanga dumar mambo zata mepa changro gres.
If we are able to make changes at the level of our values, then in fact much of the suffering that we usually experience can be eliminated.
Tini ti nani tini rentang katawa ti dumar kandri ke kanduzina kashiz ngacho tini jiktin de pena ngacho mayim bazila yimban rawo tini norwa ga tawa shinche lokba tini top tini yongkanduze.
Some of our suffering, for example, derives from the fact that in the world around us we imagine things to be a certain way when they are not.
Teni mashi pijimtsinji yongkareze ngacho te korang ngacho mayim bazila yin samne tini zongwa tang don chit ngubo neligze gona ngubo korang yakbo mashi pijimtsinji teni ngacho na semkanala dungar mambo yongkanduze.
It's because we really don't understand the true nature of things and how they operate that we cling to ideas of things in fact existing when they don't, and on account of this we experience suffering.
Pena ngacho tini mulum ter miwi nekamna mulum mujimbi nekamna ngacho karti mulum yamba mashina tini mulum ganala tini ter ngacho thongi tini ngubo thamchibo ngacho la tini kapkaps dewa ta kepa ke kare kapkaps jikta ta dumur ke kare tani chuwa ga nang ta chikpa chikyang rese.
So as in a dream, if we don't realize that we're dreaming, then all the things that happen to us we treat as real. So they may alternatively bring us happiness and pleasure, or at other times fear and unhappiness. Just as a dream operates, in fact, so does our everyday life.
Tani ngacho mulum mo ne kabna mulum yimba de shisongna tani ta dumur chama tani ta lamsang tema tak da menjo ndozi jiktak da dumur da teso chama tema tak da menjo ndozi mulum de yimba kha go sona.
If when we realize that our dream is just a dream, then any suffering that it has caused or any fear that it is caused immediately disintegrates, it disappears immediately.
Tani ngacho mulum zikita dan chowa zikindini ke khabar ta kangrezena ticho thongthong tela thongthong jangatini mulum tela ngacho tini tela tini mulum zegare ticho techo rambo jangatini ta mulum tela tani ngacho chowa zegare ti khabar ticho rangthong ma to khabar yo marez.
How are we to understand the difference between a dream and our everyday lives? Only in terms of the length of time. A dream is something that usually takes place over a relatively short period of time, whereas our everyday lives is something that are rather long in duration.
Tani pena terang ngachon nyam dindilan dindi sokhang zikanalan tsokni tani ngachon dindi khabdapshi ko ban chachipshi ko ban de mulum reta ngacho dindi mulum zimbi ko yoreta yana ngubo tong ko thola dindi yore ze gona ripi zonglu ko thone tini yashi gona halipapshi kamores.
So the fact that we are gathered here in this church this afternoon listening to a teaching from the point of view of from the theoretical point of view, if we are to ask whether or not this is a dream or in fact whether or not this is really happening, it would be in fact quite difficult to answer that.
Yeah. Ini ya siapa kemarin ngano pena tadi nanang kelola tani tong cuci kelola tani jana ke Tunggu tani lobda cemosi ke tani jiksok kenala jik tani jiksok kenala tani ngaso tarta gende ngaso malum reta tani ngaso unso arezini tani jiksok zutni tani loma cola tani lang jab tani cigi oreze tani zeng doze tani jab tam kemareze.
In 2014, high school students taking an exam in China were given the essay topic, is this a dream or not? And weren't able to respond to this question. And the students didn't pass this essay.
Yeah. Teni lo nishes sabdan sabje tidizka kongrorto teni ngacho teni lama yujinoro teni ngarang chola teni trawa korang gusum teni stigyamne teni tela langyab shosone teni the ngacho tarta malum reta ngacho teni chuare sone teni chumchu gyabare teni ngacho mambo samlo tani choa imbi gimtse mambo shate teni gimtse chikyang gimtse ngomazo chikyang sha matabares
oni shisake kungona. About 27 or 28 years ago, Lama Ishinobu or Khenpo Jimmy Phuntsok Khenpo's root teacher composed some writing on this question of whether it right now is a dream or in fact it's really everyday life, and gave it to the students. They contemplated it for a long time, and he asked them to respond to this, to provide their own opinions and reasons. Many of them tried to come up with all kinds of reasons as to why, in fact, this present moment was real. However, none of them were convincing.
Yeah. Tadi ngaco nyangma tini lama mapam jamgun mapam rambochi zizi yore tini korang tini sung nala yang ngaco or malam dang tani ngaco choani ka chobaz gyab yore ze chobaz gyabni malam ka zena ngarang demba yense tani chowa ka zena ngarang demba yen kyo zambare zene tani chobaz gyab yore tani thavji jigta nit tini ta zambare ro ke ma to ta ngarang demba yen bi gimchins
Jamgon Minpa Rinpoche penned his thoughts on this question, characterizing a debate between real life and a dream. And real life was claiming, this is true, this is really happening. And the dream claimed, no, this is a dream, I am right. And they argued back and forth. But at the end of the day, neither was able to produce convincing reasons as to whether they were true or not. So at the end of it, both appeared as false.
Teni indi ta ngaco teni mjingthar teni ngaco teni te domsik de kare jena jelun domsik de kare jena pena machisi ka teni lo jathamba ka teni nga chu machisi ka nyamnyung te teni chitsuni ga nala teni thong shi jangna teni tela malum ze gores jelun jena jingjera waya teni te nga chu machisi ka teni machisi pena lo jathamba yena lo jathamba ga teni nyamnyung machisi ga nyamnyung te chitsuni ga nala teni div jangna chong yujana yaso teni shi jangna teni tela malum ze gores.
So, in conclusion, we can say that if the contents of 100 years of human life were condensed into 2 hours, this could be called a dream.
Teni chitsu ni na la shong teni malum te nga so rambo shi ni lo ja tham ba shi jagna teni tela matse ze go gres.
And if we were able to extend these 2 hours out into the length of a lifetime, then we could call this life.
Teni tema to ko chapar chi yo mare nga so chapar shi go na shi thap ko mare nga to nyamnyung ko go ni shi thap na shi thap ko mare ripi jong lu ko jimsum ko to ni shi go na shi thap ko mare.
So, with the exception of the length of time in question, there is no difference between everyday life and dream. There's no difference that we can assert in terms at the experiential level or at the level of argument or theory.
Teni ta nga chu malum te nga chu mu chama ga teni shen na teni zimbare ze kharang demba mari zimbare ze ni teni nga chu chama ga teni sha ka yore nga chu chama shi re ze.
Many people say that dreams are false, they're not true.
Ya teni nga chu shi re ta yin na yang teni ta te nga chu malum ga na ni sar cha cha pi ji su teni nga chu o ko zimbare ze ni teni ze re ma to ba nga chu malum mu jin bi ne kam na nga chu zimba yin ba ti shi yo ma re.
However, it's only after we wake up from the dream that we say, oh, that's false. While we're still in the dream, we do not have this idea at all.
Teni malum te zimba yin ba ti nga chu chama ha ko yo re nga chu sami ke yang len ge re te yin na yang teni nga chu malum de zimba yin ba ma shi na teni malum ka nga chu la dingmer mambo njik tak ta dingmer mambo ke yong gen de wa ze.
So even though everybody knows that dreams are not true, if while we are dreaming we don't know this, then dreams bring us all kinds of suffering and all kinds of fear.
Teni yin ti teni nga chu ta dingmer mambo ze nga chu dingmer ramra mambo ze teni ta yong ge yo re ta ti yong sa de ga ni yong ge yo teni nga chu ha ko re ze teni sam lo ta na dingmer gum jong khong de ka yin ta nga chu ha ko re.
So we need to isolate or identify, in fact, what the source of our suffering is.
Teni kandi teni wana ta dungmer ta kandi yong de zena nga chu ngupu kang dang kang yin na da khorang tong go thola demba yin na da khorang tong go thola zimba yin na da nga rang chu tela demba re samni sim go thoni zimba ha chang chimbo shi jagna teni ti dungmer ke yong re.
And what the source of this suffering is, the source of this suffering is our tendency to grasp onto things, whatever they may be, as being intrinsically true.
Teni ngarang chu pena lakpa go ngupo chilan den di tambo shini teni zong jana teni ngupo de nga chu lakpa ga nang ge shi chimbo zo ko teni ten sona nga chu zummo de chan de kha shi ma shi na de nga chu zummo chat do re zummo kha shi ma shi na pena nga chu teni to ngupo den da was lakpa ga nang lan ji yo na teni to lakpa ga dum ni teni ji yo na ndo jamba zo kan ten sona nga chu lakpa den di kha shi shi go re ma to kha ma shi nam zo chat ga re.
Okay, so it's like if we're tightly grasping onto something, tightly holding it with our hands. If we are to suddenly pull our hands away, then without opening our hands, we won't be able to remove it from the object.
Yeah. Tini tin da was ka pe na nga cho so rang la yo pi wang cha yen na da so go tini che pam ju yen na da tini so go chu thop thang yen na da tini mambu nga rang so sem ga na ni hal le pan tini tambu shini tini zung yo res.
Whether it be our riches or status or fame. These are things that we typically cling to very tightly in our minds.
Teni inna teni ngazo pamjuri nanja teni wangcha tang pamjur tang teni lipo teni zupo detang tang deso tamjepo teni kapsi teni ngazo lagna ni par tonggoya da ngazo la teni rawa mepa ga toni ngazo ta par kapjan roa teni yores.
However, there are times when we need to let go, as it were, of our clinging, our grasping to these things, whether it be our attachment to riches and status, or our physical health, or our bodies.
Teni di kapsa ngazo sem parteni kapshi shigo reze sem kapshi shigo re matoba gate sem kamashini sem gatarong dendi shini zona teni dungar halipa chimbo sem kanala yongore sem kanala teni dungar mambo teni kapsi yongores.
So it's when we actually lose our grasp of these things that our minds need to open like our hands. If we continue to cling at times like this, then we will experience great suffering.
Teni sem para kapshia tila ti tapshi tila teni gum nipa tereze ngazo terang shati gum nipa ti tereze.
And the method for opening our minds or letting our minds go at this time is the second kind of meditation.
Teni ngazo terang shati gum tambo tang gum nipa re gum niti nani gum tambo te teni peda ngazo chowa ganani leka ganani shongwis non shing jata kapkapsa sem market pata. So the
first kind of meditation that I spoke about this afternoon was a kind of meditation that we can use in moments where we have a lot of pressure or stress as a way to reduce these feelings.
Teni tambo te na ta ne teni ta nga su yang nyamlin shi na pantok yore susu sem la pantok yore ti gomu nipo te hajang ka teni karchen bores.
So whilst this first kind of meditation certainly can bring us benefit, the second kind of meditation is able to eliminate our suffering completely at the root, and it is an amazing kind of meditation.
Teni tambo gom tambo tenge teni dodizu shakins.
I'm going to briefly speak about the first kind of meditation.
Teni gum tambo tela ngazo teni da tapshi shirtang tapshi haliba teni mambo yoreze gum gyablik tela mambo zindoze.
In respect of this first kind of meditation, there are many different techniques available that can be used.
Shirtam zambalang teni ta chuluk soso gangda gangla yena teni gum gyapchar teni soso la rang soso gum gyapchar manjawa teni yosares.
In the world today, among different religious traditions, there are each tradition has their own respective kinds of meditation.
Yena teni gum gyapchar ka teni tapshi chi mangshu ta njamra haliba mambo yosata teni namba ga teni jong dereze.
However, the tradition with the most diverse and numerous forms of meditation is the Buddhist tradition.
Ti nane kyang namba teni ta boba ga teni ta namba di nala bojin natan di nala chi haleba mangshu reze.
And within the Buddhist tradition, the Tibetan tradition in particular has a vast spectrum of meditation practices.
Teni boba bojin natan ga nala teni gom mangshu imbi gemsan ka rezena teni bojin natan ga nala sang ka teni ta chu ngazo pe na teni ja ga chu ta teni ngazo nyantu chu ta tso nala maybe teni sang mambo zi reze.
And the reason for this richness in meditation approaches is due to the fact that the Tibetan tradition is the Vajrayana tradition.
Teni ti sang ka na tela teni ta thapshi yang gom gyablik ka thapshi nga cho pe na shirtang ka teni thakba chimbo ta teni nyantu ka thakba te so na la mapshi pi sha mipi teni yang gom thap ha lepa mambo ti na la ndoze.
So within the Vajrayana tradition, there are many kinds of meditation that not in the Sutric, the Mahayana Sutric tradition, or in the Theravadan traditions.
Teni ti gum te sola tini ti tapshi te sola tini teni tani nga so to dungur de mepa she gore te yena ti na ne tapshi te la nga so chikte nirkams tini nga so namba main na pe nga so namba la tapa machine khan o tindi yana chulug la saw ne tapa men khan zi na namba tapshi te khorang ka peshu she na dik ndu zi ne kams.
For the time being, or for temporary benefit, it is possible for people who are not Buddhists to make use of these approaches.
Teni chupota teni ta tangone chane namba shine korang arang namba yinze teni namba ga chutu so ramba jin da chama de nyamlim shine teni ro go res. Ni pada.
The second of this, or the first kind of meditation, is the kind that anybody can appropriate. The second kind requires Buddhist faith and then following a graduated and progressive path of meditation practice.
Teni ta namba ga nani gum chupu mari namba ga tawa ta namba ga teni gum ta teni namba ga teni jamba ga teni rantang ka tawa ta so chama cha chang zi.
The second kind of meditation requires that not just the practice of the actual meditation practice itself, but also an embrace of Buddhist attitudes and values and views.
Teni gum tangbo te yinna teni nga chu namba ga tawa ta gomba ta teni jamba chama tanglim shi go mare khorang ti nang namba ga tapshi chingda ni da tindi zi tindi korang ga gang ko na ti nyamlin shi ni te shi jangna chokore jamba te so korang ga nyamlin ma shi na chokore.
But the first kind of meditation doesn't require the acceptance of a wholesale acceptance of Buddhist views and values. It's appropriate to extract, as it were, a couple of effective approaches or methods from the Buddhist tradition and put these into practice.
Teni tambo te pe na nga so chulug la ta pa machine khan na da chulug ta pa shin khan na sedang se na ya teni ti thapshi to khorang ka semla phan thong ro re je ko ta pa yo na me na semla phan ko yongdir shi ya ga thapshi zu re teni ti phan thong ro re.
So the first kind of meditation is a kind of training that simply brings benefit to the mind, and it will bring benefit to the mind regardless of the faith or religious background of the person practicing it.
Pena yoga ta vareze pena yoga inna teni tambo ti jagar ke chulu ke korang ke nyamlin zereze inna ti jine teni nga so chulu la ta pa yong ken men ken mambo teni korang so lipu teni detang ke tondak la teni nyamlin she yore te shina chokore pena ten ra boreze.
It's rather similar to yoga, which originally was a practice in the Hindu tradition, but over time became a physical practice that spread all over the world, and it's a practice from which many people gain physical benefit.
Tanita gum kang yin nan ja te la shetang asu namba gana la tini gum jablik mambo sha yore ta ni terang dini ngaso gum tangbo da nipa nipo ta tabde po zu nyung zu tini ngotu shikins.
So in the Buddhist tradition, there are many different meditation techniques and methods, some in greater detail and less, but today I'm going to describe in relation to the first and second kinds of meditation a very practical and simple meditation methods.
Tani namgin ngaso tini chowa nala ngaso semte tini ta namtok te halliban de namtok mambo de yong yore namtok te kajik chikyang tini ndukmare semte tini perna jamchu la tini rlap chimbo yo pata was raising ngaso semte.
Usually our minds experience all kinds of distracting thoughts. They arise in our minds like waves in an ocean.
Teni ngaso jamchu go rlap phajang chimbo tini to yongwa ta ngaso semti nala teni ramra yangna kap sa hajang gachewa yangna kap sa hajang sim dugba tenji mambo de yongna teni ti teni ngaso sem mara teni ne matapa sem jiwa yong matapa teni regre teni ti topko teni ngaso sem kanala mabdiwa mambo yongre mkipa.
So just like waves in an ocean, we often feel surges of extreme happiness. We also feel surges of extreme unhappiness, and it's due to these different surging feelings that we are unable to experience calmness in our minds. And on account of not being able to feel this calmness, we experience suffering.
Tani ta nga so gum tela ni pa kan tin rizna tini gum ga thapshi tela teni nga so nam tok tin chimbo yo pate tani mar chechong se tan ni tin chechong la tong go res.
So really what we are attempting to do by the first kind of meditation is to reduce the size of these waves or surges of feelings or thoughts in our minds.
Tani thama nga so tini sem ga nala nam tong de yar nam tong da ma da kya te me ne tani par sem tini ne sa chi ga thola thik sing da bo thola ne thap sona tani tela sem tela journée zegre sem jemo jiwa ngala ne thap kres.
And after extended practice, when we are able to bring these surges of distracting thoughts, to reduce them in their intensity, gradually reducing them until they become like a flat line. When we reach this stage, then we can say that we have reached a stage of calmness or equanimity.
Tani ta tinji gone nga so wona nga so semte tini tambo tarta nga so semte halepa tini namtok mambore tini namtok te chechong so ne namtok meba tinji she gona tela thapshi kang yozena tani thapshi tela gumtham jamja gu yores.
So in terms of reducing these turbulent distracting thoughts in their intensity, there are 9 concrete methods.
Teni ti thapshi mjawar guti teni nga so gum tambo teni ngun zba ne teni gum te teni yakbo z teni mjik zong go war ka teni nekap te chang chama te teni tinalan di ores ti gutinalan di ores.
And these 9 methods encompass the stages from when we begin our meditation and until we bring it to its conclusion.
Teni ti gpote nekap mjawar gpote nga so perna bok chu na la ina bojit namtang ka na la ina ti gpote rmo lamni tini ta bojit namtang da ja la yore ja chan zi ti na la ti ni po ti ni rmo la tini ngochu she ko yore se rmo tini.
These different 9 stages within a meditation or within a meditation, a session of meditation practice in both the Tibetan and Chinese traditions are depicted in visual format. They're shown in pictures.
Teni jaga nala ina jaga teni chang nala teni ti rmo go tela teni alang gi rmo ze alang ze na walang ge rmo ze jaga jiu niu tu ze ti zok doma ge teni rmo ze kire teni zge to ne ngo chu she kan do se.
In the Chinese Chan tradition, these 9 stages are depicted as the 9 oxes, sorry.
Yeah, teni boba nala teni ta ti jene gomser ta teni chigda lambo chig ta xiang lambo chigda teni chaba chig o to so sumgo teni goni teni ngoto she ko yores chig monk zero.
Oh, okay. The first being a monkey, the second being an elephant. This one being
lambo che teni mo. Yeah, jaba.
Oh yeah, and a monk. These are the three ways that these 9 stages are portrayed in the Tibetan tradition.
Teni ti ramba gu goni teni to nekap tambo ni pa samba teni gu goni teni ngotu she ko yore zenga so boju kana tanga la.
So within the Tibetan tradition, these different moments or different stages within a meditation session are depicted in these nine stages.
Teni ti nani ge nani nga chu nge terang kang shaken zena tambuk sum to shaken ze ge nani.
And what I'd like to talk about today are the first of these three stages.
Teni ngarang chu tambu teni gum jam khang ge le tambu ba teni zena teni ti gbo nani shema te chu te halipa kar chimbo mare ngama sambo te kar chimbo res.
The most important among these 9 stages are the first 3 of them, especially for someone embarking on the practice.
Teni tambo sum ge nani tambu te la kang ze ge zena njokpa ze ge zena chu borke ke na la njokpa zena kari njokpa zena chis ke ton ge zena nga chu gum jab na pe na ngarang ge sem ge na la teni martak ban rao yana teni chu ta ngupo kang ze teni sam nam rang ge sem te ti thola par jarni teni ni na pe na ngarang ge mu ke deni shanga loma zgla tani nge mugni po deni shanga loma zgla tani deni nge semte yang deni ti shanga loma ti thola jarne o nge semte yu mu te so samlo mambo motane nge shanga loma ti thola semte par jarne te din dugna de la njokba zgres.
So the first of these stages is called resting. And it's resting is like, for example, bringing my gaze to the leaf on this plant, and by concentrating on the leaf, I bring all of the other distracting thoughts in my mind into a state of rest.
Teni nga chu karti chorang nangba zgina teni nangba sarje ba teni pena sarje shakja ta ba ke thangkha o teni zngola jerne teni thangkha tela pena zhigang dan teni de ba de zhigang ze re yana chimbo ina zhigang chongchong ina sormo ji o teni ge che chongchong zu teni pena dingola jerne teni ni ge tela tani teni de gores nangba zgina.
If you're a Buddhist, you could perform this kind of practice by fixing your gaze on a tanka of a Buddha, a tanka maybe the size of half an arm span, putting it in front of you and focusing on this.
Teni karte yeshi chuluk patin resina korang yeshi gdini kelatana chokore yana ti jadam telatana chokore shizja telatana chokore tik tela tana pena jadam de ngol la jarni teni jadam go jumdo ti thola mugni po ti thola ta teni semyang ti thola par jarni teni tana chokore.
And if you were a Christian, you could do the same thing with a picture of Jesus or with the cross by putting it in front of you and focusing on it with your 2 eyes and bringing your attention to this.
Teni kyorang karte tapa tsawani menken chulu kang tapa yang menken tenisina ni kyorang changlo masik latana chokore jamba remo kang romas latana chokore tenis latana tin jugres.
And if you were a person of no particular religious faith at all, then you could do the same thing by looking at the leaf on a plant or by looking at any picture in general.
Teni tawi ne kamna nga so teni mug ni po te kola targo re teni mug zumdib mambo teni mambo nyang mare teni yarta marta mambo nyang mare mug ti thola tan go re teni mug ni po te tani teni semyang ti thola par jarne pena sanje shakja ta pa keina ra sanje gena di mensam dela tana chokore thakar la tana chokore otena sanje kala tana ra yeshi la tana ra jadam te la tana ra shangaloma la tana ra gantar tini nga chu mugni po tang tini semte tasakchi ka tola tani tini yu ya yanro manro moshi par tini chikatola par tani tini dgor tela simti tola njoze greze par njoze abena ngacho chindo tini di tola njoze ra ngarang ga simti ti tola jare ti tonda greze.
So regardless of what it is we are using as our object of concentration, of focus, whether it be a picture of the Buddha, an image of the Buddha, focusing on the spot between his eyes or at his heart, or whether it's a Christian some kind of Christian iconography or the leaf of a plant, what we need to do is focus our two eyes in a very single-pointed way upon the object, not blinking, not looking around from left to right, and in so doing bringing our minds to rest on the object that we are looking at.
Yana pe na nga cho nyangji ta was gomna tini nga cho sim gna la nyangji chipo te gomne tini nam to jam me ba shine nga cho sim te nyangji ga to la par jerne tini nyangji chipo te sim gna la samna te la njog ba jegres.
And we can also refer to this kind of resting in terms of compassion meditation, where we focus our minds exclusively on compassion and generating compassion. We do not allow our minds to wander to other things. This is also a form of resting.
Tini simti tola journée, tini nam ton ramada mambo me bashini, tini journée, tini nipi nekam na, tini nga cho thomer tini lojong shi nekam na, jondur shi nekam na, yin rambon tu thub kumare tini pe na karma shekhanda, karma chingda, yana karma ninda, tini mato yin rambon tu thub kumare ti tola tini mato tu thub kumare.
But this first kind of, this first stage resting is not something that we will be able to sustain for a very long time when we first set out. Perhaps at the beginning we might only be able to do it for 30 seconds or a minute or a couple of minutes.
Teni njog matav zena kare zena, tenga so sem kanala nam tok namanda mambu kiyong kare teni nyuk teni ta sakchila ta ne nyuk ta yo na sem ko teni duk mare teni sem ro re ze teni sem jalan ro re teni yarang bun duk tab ko mare.
So when we say not being able to rest the mind, what we mean is that even though our eyes might still be focused on the object, our minds have wandered off in another direction.
And when
this happens, we then need the second method.
Ginzena gintani nipati gintani pena nga chu marshar kayona pena chu parchila ginzeg mareze chu mambo nditi varma chatan rona tini tila ginzeg reze gintani ro atila zegre tindi indi nga cho pena simte tini titola jagona tini korang janzla sona yang layang shadong titola parja gore titola gintani ne gore tila ginjo zegreze.
And so this second approach that we take is called continual resting. It's like a drop of water. We can't talk about it being water in any kind of continuous sense, but when we have lots of drops together, like a river, then we can call this continuous or continual. So what this refers to is bringing our minds back to the object of focus when they wander.
Teni genjog zigiti teni tondakta nga so kowa tab debo zig toni sharna gin machet par nepatela zegresi gin machet par neparezi pena nga so tangbo nga so teni nyarji gomyona teni yang namtok jambazi yoni nyarji mayimba mambo sem kanala kesona te gin chaparezi o tenji mayimbar nyarji te pena karma nga karma ch tenji kanala nyarji takda gin machet yongwa tenji zela zegresi genjog zigiti tenji zerezi.
So this continual resting refers to not breaking our concentration in our meditation. So, for example, when meditating on compassion, after 5 or 10 minutes, our thoughts might wander off elsewhere. So the continual resting is really referring to establishing or maintaining a continual focus on our object.
Teni ti kapsanga so ginthat ne gona te haleba kamu yoreze haleba kamu yore nga so le tambu pazina ginthat ne thamkamare savane ne thamkamare.
However, at the beginning in particular, doing this is extremely difficult and is probably not something, in fact, we'll be able to do.
Yina te kyongmare nga so mumtni jondrshini karte tini nga so ti kirmajna jondrshina kale gin rambo ni thyongore tambu te thamkamare da.
However, it is something that if we persist in our practice, if we persevere, that we gradually will be able to achieve.
Teni ti kapsa teni nga so semna la chapjukshi govi tontak chigyo resi ti kapsa.
And at this time, there is something that we need to mentally prepare for ourselves.
Pena rungo lanzang kanga runzak teni lister bazginna teni korang ka semla chapjuk go resi ta korang teni rungo lanjona kabli mambo jab go re samdi teni chapjuk tu korang ka sem kana la yor go resi. Pena tin rawaz ka nga so semna la chapjuk go resi.
So when we talk about mentally preparing, it's like a mountaineer who's going to scale the peak of a mountain. Before he or she does this, she needs to mentally acknowledge that the difficulties that they are likely to endure.
Teni pena nga so namgin nga so choa ka nangla gum marja pine kamna nga so sem ka nangla nam tong ramra mambo yong yoreta yona te nga so hako yo mareze.
Usually in the course of our everyday existences, all kinds of discursive thoughts and distracting thoughts arise in our minds, but this is not something for the most part that we are aware of.
Teni ta nga so gum jabjati teni ha lepa ga nam to chimang song pe na nga so teni namgin gum magipi nerkab le teni chik teni ningir samgir jingir ka teni nam to chimang la song rawo.
However, when we first begin to practice meditation, it seems that these kinds of thoughts are in actual fact like they're multiplying in number.
Teni ti kapsa teni nga so mambo zaka teni semla teni kandi samro rezena o ta ngi gum jabna yakpo yong samare ngi gum jabda teni ta gum thap samare ngarang ta gum yo samare ngarang la le tang karwa yo samare samni. And it's
at this point that many people become discouraged, feel that they are not able to persist in meditation, that they're not going to achieve good results, that they're not really cut out for it, and on this basis abandon their practice. But this really isn't a case of not having the good karma for meditation or otherwise not being cut out for it. In fact, every single person is like this. This kind of mental occurrence is the rule for every individual.
Soa nangla gum marji pine kamna dindi nam tok mambo yongo yore tarun dali yang mangs yore ta ti kapsangi dang marji pere nge samlo ma tang wi jimsin ji mashi pare tarta nge gum jab pine kamna ngarang la nam tok kandi mambo yo ba de ngarang ga shi songare ma to ba nam tok je mangs songwa mare samni dindi sam go res.
What we need to tell ourselves at this moment is not that our discursive thoughts are increasing or multiplying, but rather that before we began to meditate and observe our minds, we in fact had no idea about the nature of our discursive thoughts, or even that we had them at all. So really what we are experiencing is an observation of the discursive thoughts we had in any case, and not their multiplication or increase.
Tani ti kapsa nga cho rang la senso she go re senso she ne o ta kyung mare ta nam tok mambo ndu ta ti kyung mare nge nam tok ta jimang lan ro mare jinyong lan ro re o dindi ne kabla ta mus ta se na le tambo pi kapsa ta nam tok mambo yo re ti kyung mare nge yin dam manda tani gum go sam ne ti kapsa tini sam go re.
And so we need to comfort ourselves at this point, recognizing that our discursive thoughts are not multiplying, that they will get less, and that we need to persist in our practice.
Teni ngaso teni tari ngaso tapsi xim yo pinen ka nipati tere tine kamna jini ki ngaso gin thne gin rambo she etamato tar goze hajang rambo she tab kumare ta karma ni da sam ra nga da tindi kana la jin ma chet par teni ngaso teni sem tindi ne to moto tar go res.
So this is the second stage of this practice, continual resting, which refers to the being able to focus, to concentrate on our object for an extended period of time. At the beginning, it won't be for very long, maybe only a couple of minutes, but this is the second stage.
Tani ta tabshik samba derezi. Tabshik samba tila lan tin jokbaz gerezi. Lan tin jokbazina, lan zina kang zina pena nge tangbo tini nyangji da bozu gom yona tini ngaranga semte tini jambazla sone nyangji maimba tini tondak mepa ndura mepa tomi kishawa mambo semkanala tini sam yongrezi ti sambine kamna nge yang ngaranga semte laryang shir yongne nyangji ga thola paran jokore tela lanzena yangkirti thola paran jokore o tela landin jokbaze grezi.
So this third stage is repeated resting, which refers to bringing our mind back to our object of concentration after it has wandered away. So as if we were doing meditation on compassion, if our minds were to go off onto somewhere else, repeated here refers to that repeated action of again bringing our mind back to our object of focus.
Teni ti kapsa teni ulan tin jok pazi tin jok gona ngachola ti kapsa teni tornang shi go agni yoze ti kapsa.
In bringing our attention back, there are two things that we need to keep in mind.
Tornang shi go sa tangbo de kangrezina ngacho sim te pena nyangji tangbo ngacho nyangji gom go yona teni ta khorang nyangji maim ba tondak jambaz pena ngarang chimsang go tondak da boda yang chung japje teni ji khesang ga tong dang ra bu teni jamba sam ga yona teni lamsang teni ngarang ga hakko go re ong ni nyangji gom gom du ngarang ga jamba sam ga du sam ba de lamsang shi go re.
So the first thing that we need to keep in mind, or the first thing we need to do when our minds wander, so say we are meditating on compassion, the moment that we realize our mind has wandered off, perhaps thinking about something to do with our families or maybe our business or something like that, what we need to be able to do is immediately recognize that our minds have wandered off. This recognition that our mind has wandered is important.
Teni kartite mashina pena ngarang ga tangbo nyangji gom go na ta nga semde nyangji mogum ni teni tondak jambaz teni samlo tang teni she ko je ta ngarang ga hama ko na teni nga chu karma rnga karma ch teni ga nala teni nam tok nyangji sawa ni gom gum are korang ga jambaz sam go yore ta ina ngi teni simla dagbo ma gim ni teni tichu mambo cholak tang ro res.
If we're not able to recognize when our minds wander off, then it may in fact be the case that while we are sitting down meditating, as it would seem on compassion, our minds have actually gone off somewhere else, and maybe for even 5 or 10 minutes at one time. And this is a great waste of time in our practice.
Tindi yendi tini ngaso tini nge pena ngarang ka tambo nyangji gom go na tani ta nyangji maim baz tini sem ga nala tini chanyuna titi lamsang tini hakko go re lamsang o nge nyangji maim baz nge nyangji gom gom du ngarang ka jambaz sa samlo tang du samne lamsang chang go re ti tondak tambo re.
So the first thing is this immediate recognition that we are no longer concentrating on what we are intending to concentrate on. I'm meant to be concentrating on compassion, but I'm no longer doing that. I'm thinking about something else. This is what we need to train ourselves to recognize.
Tini tondak nipa te gang re zena tini pena tadi nyarji gom go yona ta ngarang ka sem go nyarji mugum ne tini khorang ka jambaz sam go yona tingi shi song na tini shibatamji choko mareze ta shima thata tini khorang semti sirchi yongo gore sirchne nyarji ga thola par jegne or mantni nyarji ga thola tini tan jogo gore no tela lantin jogba zegre yankir nyarji ga thola par tini jegne tini she go gore ti tondani bares.
Simply knowing or recognizing, however, that our minds have wandered off is not enough. What we need to do after we realize that this is happening is bring our minds back to our object of focus. And it's this bringing of the mind back that we are talking about with repeated resting.
Teni tendi go ni teni yang rambola kale jondrshe go re nga so simtela jondrshe atela hachanga thapsi go re pe na nga so tendro jondrshe na pe na ta tini to khalo ti bandao lambo chi teni ndrjong ze re tendi she bandao to so la tini thapsi go re tenda wo she nga so sim tini jondrshe go na kale tini thapsi go ni jondrshe go re.
So we need to train our minds using an approach and a method like this, just as we would train or tame an animal like a horse or an elephant, so too do we need to train our minds.
Teni thapsi tela teni kale teni nga so simte halipa pe na so chisu shekhanda ota karma nyesheta teni na la nin sim chigtola pe na nyang gomna nyang chi changba ma to ba jang musamba da teni yang karte nyarji magum nga so jirni da bogomna sem ganala teni chiso shekandra chiso chingdra teni zganala teni namtok jamba chig me pa shini teni hachang teni jiwa teni zganala ne tham kres.
And if we apply this approach, then it will be possible for us for a period of 20 minutes or half an hour, to remain in concentration on our particular object of meditation, whether it be compassion or whether it be a shamatha practice. We will be able to remain in a state of single-pointed concentration on our object of meditation.
Teni ti ka sa pe na nga so jamcho na la long jamni teni ralub chimbo yongo yo kapsa teni long te mar me pare sona teni jamcho ngola lab me pa teni jamcho ngo par teni to lab chiji me pa teni demo rendo re pena tinda bore ne semte par demo rendo res. And
this will enable us to bring a great peace to our minds, just as an ocean, when there's a great wind blows and then the waves churn up and it's very violent and choppy. When the wind subsides, then so too do the waves, and the ocean face becomes very calm. We can achieve the same result with our minds.
Teni kartenga su nimare la teni karma nishin dao chisu shekanda chisu chingda teni rela teni gomthap sona teni ngazu sem kanala yo pi teni dungwar mambota teni non shikta teni tongser kana tawan dao to so changma teni tin meba shin res.
And if we can persevere in this kind of practice daily for 20 minutes or half an hour or an hour, then much of our mental suffering, our pressure, depression, etc. can really be reduced.
Then do we Gimson the Congressina tending also Tonsir Ganadian Nanda, Teni Onunshigina, same market by Nanda, this would Tamshipong also same Ganala Teni Namton Ramada Mambo, Hajang Mambo Kini. And the
reason that this kind of approach is effective for feelings of unhappiness or stress or depression is that, in fact, these mental states emerge from our minds.
Ate sem nam tok mambo kiv jak pi jimsen ji sem marke pas ngores. Sem nam tok mambo kiv jak pi jimsen ji sem marke pare ngores.
Yes, so it's a result that these states are brought about due to the fact that our minds are generating a lot of negative thoughts, and these are responsible for the suffering in our minds.
Tani tal nam tok te so tam chupo me pare ne tini sem jeware song ine kamna tini jewati nala dungur chi yo mare jewati nala dungur yo mare tini jewati te ti nala yarambo da one thamna tini dungur samati nala jine pena nam khane khawa bavna so nala khawa bavna tini so nala khawa bavna so nani tini shirendo re pena tinda bores.
And if we can maintain this practice or extend this practice over a period of time, then the sufferings in our mind will cease to exist, like snow falling into a lake that simply melts away. So it will be when negative thoughts arise in our minds.
Teni tingani teni nyarje tang teni sem kebo da teni yonga teni sem hachang kebo yonga tang teni sem kana la nyar je tang to so yak po ki ni tin je yong gres.
And with this state, then compassion and the nyungjiedang.
Nyar je ki gre te sem ki po yong gres.
Oh, yeah, but that we will be able to generate compassion well, and our minds will generate happiness.
Ota tinji indi teni nga so gum tambo te tere te tarong te la jipcha she go re nge terang sha chi tum dor di tambo zre jipcha te so teni re choran so namba ga teni jong la teni tarong jmo ta ne teni she na teni ti na la gum tham ram ra ha le ba mambo ndu te so kan gum na chokore te la tarong jipcha te go re.
So this first type of the first kind of meditation that I've described today has just been a very brief and simple introduction. The Buddhist tradition offers much more detailed instructions on how to engage in this kind of meditation, and if this is something that you are interested in pursuing, then the Buddhist tradition offers more detailed descriptions on how this can be done.
Teni gum te teni soso teni pecha tani soso yige tani gum na yakbo yong mare te yin namana te la gum par chengkeng ge gergen zu go re se teni gergen khorang la yin na teni gum gyab ya ge nyamyong yakbo yong keng ge teni gergen zu ge teni par lob go re se teni tin sam ne nga so rang ge lob jong yakbo shi chai ji se teni rang ge teni rang ge chim ni gum na ten zhe ge re.
It's usually not effective for us to simply learn meditation by reading books ourselves and sort of self-teaching, as it were. In order to practice well, we need to have a meditation teacher who has achieved some experience themselves. And after we have learnt well under their instruction, then we can continue with this practice in our own homes.
Tendi goni gum nyamnyong yong kan tendi zaka teni chna teni rang gum te kale ya jin jo re tambo ngaso pena gum nyima chinda zangkur chinda tendi zala gum jamna ti nala ya ji chimbo rogo mare ta te kyo mare kale rogo re ngaso jang rambo la ta go re ma to ngaso zangkur chinda bola gum ni te yak boz mayona o tangi gum shi samare samne yug jagna tendi ko mare jin kyung go re.
So under this proper instruction, gradually our meditation will progress. It's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in 1 week. We need to persist in our practice. It's not something that we should cast aside because we don't feel we've got immediate results with.
And
this is the first kind of meditation that we're going to talk about today.
This
kind of meditation is called shamatha. The second kind of meditation today, due to time, I'm probably not going to be able to talk about in great detail, but what it is a meditation that is based on the calmness that we've established with the first kind of meditation, looking at the essence of the heart, and it's not the heart of the mind, and understanding, in fact, what the nature of the mind really is.
And the
benefit of understanding or knowing the nature of the mind is that all of our sufferings, whether great or small, in fact, originate from not knowing this. So this involves us appreciating that all of our happiness or attachments or unhappinesses are in fact just like dreams.
Teni mulum watawaz teni shisona teni ngazo pena mulum ganala mulum yeba shisona dungur mepan rawo reyongres.
And upon knowing this, it's just like discovering in a dream that one is simply just having a dream.
Yena tine kamna ngazo nyarji teni yarji sindore nyarji kena teni chokore ngazo njikchakta teni khongchoda teni tso meparin rore ta yena nyarji rawota tso sama yarji chevzang rores.
But our compassion will continue to increase and to develop. Our negative emotions, our suffering, our fear, etc., these will disappear.
Teni ti kapsang aso teni randu kasamlo mamboda, teni khungchoda, khunzanda, teni tadrig teni ta nyomumba sama meba chakares.
And at this point, our various negative feelings of resentment and anger, etc., will subside.
Teni nyarji yarji song jimsenji teni tina kamna ngazo manamla teni pamba mambo drib kare, teni jampan tela teni ta leka ta drib kares.
Nyungje teni.
Nyarji ki jimsenji jampan ki leka legares.
And the reason that our compassion continues to develop is that we are engaging, or that we are working for the benefit of others.
Teni jampang leka ta mambo lena teni tina ne soso ranga teni matse tondang dambarin rores.
And when we do a lot of work for the benefit of others, then our life becomes very meaningful.
Teni matse tondang dambare patang tedang nyamde teni sosoranga dewa tang kepang ngomata ngaso te jampar dribna tinang ne yongres.
And while our life is in addition to our lives becoming more meaningful, we realize that true happiness and joy, in fact, is derived from benefiting and helping others.
Teni ngaso jantun dribata jampan dribala tinni teni shongwi dewate teni dewa ngomate rese.
So this happiness that is derived from helping others is ultimate happiness.
Teni terang ngaso shito teni chat teni ngaso shatsar song teni tsamaga tarong yang jivchashi ni lojong yakboshi ni teni gomjabro cheese teni jabachi me sama yakbo nyan song tji cheese.
And that brings to an end this afternoon's teaching. May everybody study well and meditate well. Thank you all for listening.